never would think about anything from our perspective. So when it came to like when I
Mhm.
was like, "Oh, we're gonna wear dresses," and I was like, "But I'm the only person in my entire community that's my age and black." Like you put like a red X all over me. Like
Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Adapt to Gals podcast. As you can see, Hawa is missing, but she should be joining us a little later. As for now, it is just me and Julie today. Julie had done an interview with us previously about 2 months ago, and so now she's back to do a part two because our channel is for adopted adoptees, and we want adoptees to come on, tell their stories, not only to just heal and to also share and help other adoptees. And by the way, Julie's video, I feel like Julie's video is like what got us like on the map. Like her video has gotten so many views because her story is so interesting. So when she was like, I want to come on again, we're like, oh yeah, come on, come on, we want to hear it. So Julie, if you know people, for those of you who have not seen the first video, Julie, just go ahead and introduce yourself a little bit and just let us know about your story, and then we'll just go on from there.
yeah, so I was born in Cameroon, West Africa. My parents adopted me. I was adopted by white missionaries. And because they were missionaries that were still living in the area, spent about half my childhood there. So then I came to the States with them, and we lived in northern Minnesota, like Famata,
Yep.
for the rest of my
Oh,
childhood. And now I live in Atlanta, Georgia. But yeah, I've enjoyed this journey of connecting with adopted gals and finding a space for adoptees. Ever since I was a little child, I've always had a heart for adoption. And I don't think I could identify what it was. At first, I thought it was like because, oh, I either had to
mhm,
be an attorney that like helped adoption, or did that mean I had to adopt? What did that mean? I just didn't really
mhm.
know. But finding
Yeah.
this space has been really encouraging because I realize there's so many ways that we can help adoptees, and I think this is a
Mhm.
huge part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what the channel is created for, and you finding us was definitely like part of it. It's meant to happen, you know.
Yeah.
And a lot of a lot of times when we create a video, you see the video, I'm like, oh my gosh, I can connect to this, I can relate to this. Like I cannot like it's so amazing to find because I feel like adoptees like us were adopted by transracial like white people or the races of people that adopt black children, we're such a small niche to the point where sometimes you feel so alone, like people like me
Mhm.
don't exist. And so creating
Yeah.
this channel and then you fighting us through this channel was so perfect.
I know.
And
I
so
found you guys, and I was like, wait, what? Minnesota?
they
What girl from
exist.
West Africa?
We exist. We exist. We exist. But yeah, and of course, and on our channel, we talk about, topics that are relating to adoptees and transracial adoption and like the importance of it. And one of the biggest topics that we've talked about was can anyone just adopt, meaning financial, like Julie was one of those cases where her family was not, financially, they did not have the financial means to adopt, but they did anyways, and she did face a lot of things and traumas because of that. Now, Julie, do you want to talk a little more about that?
Yeah, I think there's kind of this misconception that if you adopt a child, then you're adopting a, poor starving kid in Africa.
Yeah.
as, as we know. And then they're like, and then you're gonna be adopted by, Americans, and you're gonna be fine. Like you're
Mm-hmm.
no longer going to be poor. And that
Mm-hmm.
just wasn't the case for me. And I think what was hard is like I think back to some of the stuff that I went through, and sometimes I'm like, why didn't anybody else see this or
Mm-hmm.
say something? And I think some of it goes back to people just don't want to believe that somebody would
Mm.
adopt a child and not properly provide for them.
Yes.
And I mean, I guess it kind of goes back to you can birth children and not provide for them. Now,
Mm-hmm.
you would think you wouldn't do that with adoption because that's a whole lot more work,
Mm-hmm.
but really was the case. So when I was in Africa was one thing because everybody there was living poor. So there
Mm-hmm.
really was no disparity really between us. And in one sense, my dad did a little bit more with our house, so that our house was better than just the way the
Mhm.
Africans was. But when we moved to Minnesota, we moved to northern Minnesota, and my dad thought it would be a great idea to buy a trailer,
Oh,
which
I did
means
not
it's
know you
not
lived in a
prop.
you
Yeah.
live I did not know you lived in a trailer. I don't know why I assumed a house.
So it was a
Wow.
trailer, so not a house, which means the insulation is like half of what a house is.
In cold ass Minnesota.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, girl. I'm so sorry.
Yeah. So living in a trailer, the first winter we did not have, because it wasn't fully like insulated and everything. So of course the
Yeah.
pipes freeze. So my
Mm.
dad's like, okay, we put in a pump, like an old fashioned hand pump outside for us to like pump water.
Oh my gosh.
So
Oh
I'm
my god.
9 years old pumping water outside.
In Minnesota and cold. Oh my god. I cannot imagine. And hearing stories like this, even though I talk shit about my parents a lot on this channel, I hear stories like that and I'm like, I'm so grateful that I did not have that experience. And the conversation does go back to like when you said, people see things, but they don't say anything. Like, and it's like, oh, well, they're good people. They adopted, they're good people. Maybe it's just a child that's just making stuff up or just elaborating things. But because that whole adoption just like puts this like glare on people's eyes to not actually be like, that's not right. Like you need to actually do a little better. And Howard and I have talked about it in the past where she was kind of playing the devil's advocate in, well, you're no longer, like you said, you're no longer living in impoverished Africa. You're in a better area. But it's like moving somebody from a different kind of poverty to a new poverty is still not the answer. And we had talked about, okay, so adoption is not the only answer. You can do things like sponsor a child, whether if it's someone that you can take the child in like kinship. There's so many different ways. And also countries that we need to actually hold accountable, like my birth country, Sierra Leone. Like, why are there so many children that need to be freaking adopted? Like, we need to hold them accountable. You need to do something about this, because the idea of moving kids from one poverty to the next, it doesn't work. That's not a better, lesser evil in any kind of way, because a child should not be at 9 years old in cold Minnesota pumping water outside and there is no insulation. That's just crazy to me. It's
Yeah,
so crazy to me.
and I think the thing for me is because um people who are missionaries,
Mm-hmm.
people who adopt children are put on this pedestal of being these
Yeah.
sacrificial people.
Oh, mm, yeah.
And like I read something that so my parents have two biological children,
Mm-hmm.
and recently one of them had posted something, and they were talking about like, and they've done this a couple times, one of them in particular, but he's talking about like all the sacrifices that his parents did and all this stuff. And I just sat there and I was like,
Mm,
no,
mm,
because they were
yeah.
like, oh, like the sacrifices that they did to go and like adopt these girls and all these things. And like, and I did. I grew up with, my dad would say things like, oh, like we went to Africa, we had to adopt you, and then like we had to go back and get paperwork, all this sacrificial stuff that he did. And I'm like, first of all, you asked to do this. Like in my head, I'm
Mm-hmm.
thinking, you're the parent, you're the adult in the room, you asked to do this. But two, I think when you create this pedestal for them,
Mm-hmm.
no one challenges or touches them. I think
Yeah.
there should be more accountability for adopted, like people who are adopting. Like they should
Yeah.
be seen as, okay, you're adopting, that's great, what are you
Mm-hmm.
doing to make this child's life better?
Exactly. That is so
And
true.
if that's not the push, the constant push, then yeah,
Mm-hmm.
you just get adopted and then you're in this, situation. So growing up northern
Yeah.
Minnesota with in a trailer, having a car that didn't have like hardly any heat,
Mm-hmm.
um, not having indoor plumbing during the winter time. So that meant
Mm-hmm.
my dad was
Oh my
like, okay,
God.
we're gonna make this like bucket to use to go to the bathroom in. And like just
Wow.
and
That is.
like I'm just like, and I think what was always hard was like I would go places then because I was homeschooled, so I was very isolated. So
Yeah.
never around other people except for with my family. So we'd go places and people would be like, "Oh, those little black girls from Africa." People would be like, "Yeah, like we adopted them. Oh my gosh, that's so amazing. You must just be so grateful and so blessed." And
Yeah.
I just was like,
N-
and it was hard
no.
for me to wrap around my head of like, there's something wrong with this picture.
Right.
Like something's wrong with this picture. Like, how am I so lucky and
Yeah.
so blessed?
Right, because it just really just goes back again into the saviorism, the white saviorism. I sacrifice for you, for you, for you. And it's like, and then we just forget the child also sacrifices. The child is experiencing trauma. Like adoption, like you say this, adoption is born out of trauma. It's a traumatic thing that people experience. You've lost your country, your food, your people, everything that you knew. Now you're stuck, you're put into this new area, and you have to learn how to adjust. You have to learn how to fit in and be part of this culture that you don't know. And a lot of times, like, do I even want to be part of this culture? And also, like, experiencing what you were experiencing, experiencing, like, no, I don't feel lucky. I don't feel like I'm lucky because I'm having to use a bucket to use the bathroom and go outside and pump water. And
And I think the
it's go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
oh no, you're fine. I just remember like it messing with my head of thinking like somehow I'd feel bad that I wasn't feeling super grateful.
Mm,
And the older I get, I'm like, no, I didn't have to be grateful for that.
no,
But
it's
but
because
as a child, you're like, everybody's telling me I should be grateful
yeah.
because they put on this pedestal of these people who went missionaries go to Africa, save these two children who probably might have died.
Yeah. Yeah. It's because it was ingrained in you. Like I still struggle with that sometimes where like, even though I don't have a relationship with my parents, where that whole like that little voice in the back of my head, you should be grateful, you should be grateful. You are so ungrateful for saying this. Why are you even starting an adopted girls channel for adoptees where it's gonna make your parents look bad? Like you should be grateful because literally in the beginning of your adoption, it's being ingrained in you to be grateful. You are in the promised land, things are better now. There's plenty of whatever. And it's like
Mhm.
no, like stuff like that you should not have to be grateful for. And it's did anybody let me ask you, did anybody in, whether it's family or friends, did anyone ever step in and say these are not the right conditions? And also to follow up to that question, did your dad ever try to do anything to get out of that, to create a better life for you guys?
So here was the thing. When we moved to Minnesota, we weren't living near any family.
Okay.
And my mom's family, lives in Atlanta. And I remember, especially now as an adult, I think through the situation, I'm like, so you took the
Hmm.
two black girls, moved to Minnesota instead of living in Georgia.
Hmm.
Okay, that didn't really make any sense because my parents had
Hmm.
lived in Georgia before. Um, but so where we were in Minnesota, we weren't near family. I think some of that might have been intentional because there wasn't family around to really say anything.
Okay, so I was gonna say, can you go a little more into that? But you just started.
Yeah, so that because I remember having conversations with my grandfather, my mom's dad, who I was really, really close to, lived in Atlanta, and he would say things like, I was really concerned. I would always, say like, hey, come stay with us and like do all that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
And but they didn't see all those same living conditions. So
Okay.
that was part of it. Um, I think even when some people would see some of it, it was always during the summer, and my dad would do all this work to get
Okay.
plumbing working while they were there.
Wow.
And I
Wow.
think back to this now, and I'm like, hmm. So they would get it like we had a couple of family reunions, and so he'd get stuff working during the summer, but he wouldn't do anything to sustain it for the winter.
Yeah.
And so, for example, we had my dad heated with wood stove. So not only just heat, but heat with a wood stove. Because everything with my dad was about living as cheap as he possibly could. He was like, I want to see how long it will take me to be like, how long I can stretch this money. It's like, okay. So he would do these kinds of things, but in the wintertime, it gets cold. he wouldn't get up in the middle of the night to like stoke the fire. So we would wake up and we're like, okay, it's
Crazy.
cold as heck. Like I can see my breath in my own bedroom.
Oh my gosh. You see, we've, like Julie and I have created a relationship outside of like, her coming on and stuff like that. We've had conversations, but I'm looking shocked because she's never like went into details of like the conditions that she was living in. That's insane.
And I mean, and to be honest, like as I'm saying these things, some of this is kind of the not really the first time I've really said it, but you live your life, you kind of go through it, and it's a whole bunch of craziness, and you're just like, how do I tell people all of this
Yeah.
stuff? You know, but realizing how much like trauma, like you're sleeping with five blankets, you're trying to like figure out, and then it would get cold enough, and my dad would be like, okay, we're gonna put a blanket up. We're not gonna heat the whole trailer, so we're all gonna sleep in one big room. Mind you,
Basically bodies to keep warm.
so
What
then
kind
I'm
of
also
freaking
like, but then we're also trying to homeschool during that time period. So my schooling was atrocious. I mean, it's a wonder. It's a wonder I
Was there any kind of, like illness that developed from living like that? Anything that came up during that time? Because I can't.
Yeah, right. So here's some of the thing. One, I think we were just very fortunate where we didn't get a lot of illness. But I will
Mhm.
say, my mom has suffered from a lot of respiratory stuff.
Oh my
That I contributed. I was like, Mom, you've got to go. Like, finally, I didn't realize I could make her do anything in the last couple years, but I told her she had to go to the doctor, and she listened to me, and she started
yeah.
getting so much relief. And I'm like, because you're living in these conditions that are terrible for her, all her allergies that she has.
Yeah.
Because you can't live in those types of conditions. It's
Yeah.
just not normal. So then to your other question where you asked, did anything ever improve? And see, that's my problem. My problem is really the second question you have. Nothing
Mhm.
ever got better.
So your dad never
Um,
actually made any efforts
no.
to do
So we
anything.
started it. So at 9 years old, we buy that first trailer. We have the first really hard winter, our first winter like that. It gets a little bit better when he's like, okay, he's gonna try to figure out how to do plumbing for a little bit. And then he's like, oh, maybe, but we're still living in a trailer. Oh, while he's like, oh, I'm gonna build this house. I'm gonna build this house. And he like starts and then like never really like it's like this project that never got done. So
Yeah.
lived in a trailer my entire growing up experience, and every winter we would go into like this smaller trailer. Eventually we got like a bigger trailer, so in the summertime I had my own room, my sister had her own room. We had
Mhm.
like um running water, but I will say, even though with all of that, I never remember having both cold and hot running water in the entire place. Like it would
Wow.
either be in one
Or
or
the other.
another, like either in the bathroom or in the kitchen or something like that. But it never did. And then at one point it got even worse because then my dad was like, you know what? We're going to be traveling so much. I just want to turn the electricity off. I want to turn it back on every time we have to come. So then we went to like kerosene lamps, like back in the old days lamps.
Oh my gosh.
And that was me at like 17. So it never got better.
What was your father thinking? What was like what
I
what
don't
was the
understand.
purpose? Like what was the purpose?
I don't know. Like I know sometimes like he's made comments. One time he made a comment. He's like, "Oh, I raised my girls to be tough," and I was like, "So were we preparing for some uh,
What were
end
you
times
preparing?
world ending that I didn't know about?" Like,
What the hell?
but yeah. And so I was like, and as the older I've gotten, and now I live in a beautiful home,
Mhm.
and we bought a house, we've done all this work, and
Yeah.
a really pivotal moment for me was last year we got my adorable dog. I'm very obsessed with my little dog.
He's so
Famata's
cute.
met him. He's very cute.
He's such a cutie, y'all.
um, but like I was doing stuff with him, and then I realized at one point I told my husband, I said, I think I spend more money in a year on him than that was spent on me growing up
Wow.
in a year.
Wow.
And my husband's like, "You're
That's
joke." I was
insane.
like, "I'm not joking." Like,
That's crazy to think about. So, like, when it comes to, food, clothing, was it the same thing? Like, did you have to do a lot of have like a lot of hand-me-downs, or
oh yeah,
what
so
was
it
that?
was very my dad was like, "Food and clothing, thou shalt be content." You know, the whole Bible verse with that. And so yeah, my mom made everything from scratch when it came to food. Like I grew up eating like bread from scratch, all that
Mhm.
kind of stuff. We only ate like I only ate we ate cheap vegetables, anything that was cheap. We bought everything in stock. Like we had flour in
Mhm.
stock, rice in stock, like all that kind of stuff. I'd never had a brand new pair of jeans until I was 18.
Wow. So nothing really was ever brand new.
No. If I got anything like a new pair of anything, it was because somebody would gift it for me for like my mom might buy me for Christmas or my birthday, but like did not buy
Mhm.
new clothes. We went to thrift stores. I still have trauma. I can't go to thrift stores for clothes. I know people do
Really?
that these days,
Oh my
but
god. I mean, I totally understand why. I totally
like my
understand.
trauma is just like I
Versus
can't do it.
versus someone like me who didn't have that. Like, I can go into a thrift. Hey, Hawa, I can go into a thrift shop and not have that because I don't have that trauma. So it would
Yeah.
totally make sense as of why you would have trauma from that, because that's crazy.
Yeah. So just very like, I mean, like I said, when I tell you bare bones, and then we were homeschooled on top of it, but we didn't do like a normal curriculum. So my
Hmm.
dad was also cheap with that. He'd be like, well, what books can we like get for free? Like, could we like erase things? Could we get things that were passed down? You know, the amount of textbooks I had that were outdated were like a lot. I'd be like, wrong president year. Let's just say that.
What was your mom? Okay, so with my story, it seems like with you, your biggest thing was with one of your parents, which was your dad. For me, it was my mom.
Mhm.
What was your mom thinking during all of this? Like, what was she doing? What was her? What was she doing?
I mean, a big part of it was, I think, being raised in the really, really strong, or not raised, but my parents are both very, very religious. And so my
Yeah.
mom really took to heart this idea that, like, the man is the head of the household. And so she was very
Okay.
much like, okay, whatever my dad, said. And for a while, there were some things that my mom even did herself that were weird and strange. She was less weird on some of the things. Like I think she would have preferred to have had a normal house and had
Hmm.
running water and like that kind of stuff. Like she would have preferred that. But there were other
Yeah.
strange things. Because they got into like weird religious circles, and my mom's like, okay, we're all gonna just wear dresses now. And I was like, what? We're in Minnesota. And then I tried to like explain to her at one point. I was like, but mom, I already stand out because I'm black. And I think
And
that
you
was
want
a
to add another crazy to
and I
this?
think that's a pivotal thing that I realized even back then, and I think about this now, is some people when they adopt their children, they want to raise them exactly the same as if they were their biological children. That's
Hmm.
the way my parents did it. They were like, we have biological children, we now have adopted children, we're raising them exactly
The
the same.
same.
But that was a problem because we weren't the same. And so
Hmm.
they never thought about anything from our perspective. Like
There's so much trauma that can develop from that.
ever.
There's
Like
so much
ever.
trauma.
Like one, you raised boys, you didn't raise girls, so now you're raising girls. Now you're raising two girls that are black, they are adopted. Never would think about anything from our perspective. So when it came to like when I
Hmm.
was like, oh, we're gonna wear dresses, and I was like, but I'm the only person in my entire community that's my age and black. Like you put like a red X all over me. Like, and it's not like nowadays where everybody wears dresses and it's like a thing now.
Yeah.
Back in the 90s and the 2000s, like in the 2000s, no one was doing that. You stuck out like a sore
Right.
thumb. And also, I get cold all the time. So,
Hmm.
living in a house without proper like good heat, driving a car that hasn't doesn't have good heat, that's just miserable for me.
Yeah.
So that idea was that one came from my mom. And so she had her own like weird things that she would get into too. I mean, she had to be kind of to be married to my dad. I mean, in one sense. Eventually she did get out of it and finally was like, you know what, that's
Enough is
dumb,
enough.
that's stupid. But she has since told me, she was like, I just never realized how hard it was for you guys. She said, I just and I think this is something I've seen with other people. So my grandfather, when my mom was really young, like she went through her own trauma of like he was poor, they were
Hmm.
really poor, and so my mom remembers being like hungry, and one point he drank too much, and so they didn't have enough money for this, and so my mom remembered some of those things as childhood. So she was
Hmm.
like, well, because your dad always provided, I always had enough to eat. She like
That
could
was
not see
enough.
anything else as trauma
Yeah.
or abuse.
Yeah.
And
And
I'm
that's,
like,
I feel like that's very common. Like, and people who
yeah.
are traumatized, like, they're like, if I was able to survive that, or I knew somebody that was able to survive it, you can too. And it's like, no,
yeah.
we don't need to repeat the same offend, and
And that was one of our videos, like 5 reasons like you should not adopt. Like, you parents have to go to therapy and face their own trauma and things that have happened to them, so they don't pass that on to a child who already has trauma that they're adopting. Because how are you supposed to like
Mm-hmm.
improve things for your kids if you see what happened to you as fine? Like, that was one of my biggest thing with my parents, is like, I'm like, the things that happened to you, they were not fine, and you still have not dealt with that. And because of that, I experienced trauma from them, from me trying to explain to them,
Yeah.
hey, this hurt me. And in their mind, well, you should be fine. It's like, no, you have to do your own digging and go to therapy, because what may have happened to you, that's not fine. It's not
And it's
okay.
also like learning from it, because this was the thing with my grandpa. Yes, my when my mom was really little, like 7 years old and stuff. I mean, he had kids and he was trying to go to school, and it was back in, the 1950s, 60s, all that kind of stuff. But he kept
Hmm.
improving.
Hmm. Okay.
So by the time, she graduated from high school, is a very different experience. And you know what I mean? Like as he
Yeah.
climbed the ladder, houses, everything changed. Mine didn't, as as I articulated to you. So it wasn't like they were in a like, oh, we're struggling right now. And like
Yeah.
if we had improved, I might have been like, you know what? Okay, we had a bad first year or two. But
yeah.
you
Yeah.
just thought that that was okay.
Yeah.
So,
And
like,
that was
when you and the kids like talk to the parents, did you guys ever feel comfortable talking to your parents about this kind of stuff and like how they're impacting you?
As an
No, I
adult.
mean, I remember talking to my older brother because, like I said, there was the gap in my older brother, like, had gotten married, one of them in particular. And I was like, okay, so you also live like pretty, like, minimalist and everything too, but you have heat and running water all through the year. And I was like, so if you can do this, then dad can too. But
Yeah.
why not? Like, you know what I mean? And I just don't know. Like and I think about like the activities that they had us do, like because we heated with wood, we had to go like haul wood and find wood and like sometimes my dad would cut down a tree and
Oh my
like I'm
gosh.
9 years old, like hauling logs. Like I was like, this kind of feels like not
Girl,
much
it keeps getting
contributing.
worse and worse.
I was like, and
My-
my husband now will be like, child services would have snatched you up. He's like, there would have been no
yeah.
way you would have been. I know you guys did that video about the family that had the slaves.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
some of the stuff you guys were talking about, not the, I mean, the locked in the shed, that was a whole nother level. Never had that. But some of the stuff you guys were saying, I was like, that
Pretty similar.
was a lot more similar.
Do you think that maybe they thought, because I know some parents, like African parents, for example, like their idea of discipline is so different than non-African parents. Like you can't whoop a child, into doing the right thing in America. Like in Africa, you can apparently. Do you think that maybe your parents were thinking, well, this is how our kids are going to build character? Some parents like they like to
Mm,
put their kids through harder things that are
Yeah,
just so abnormal because they think it builds character and makes them learn to work
yeah,
hard,
yeah.
like
They were like, we're gonna
really
raise tough
conditioned.
kids, like not soft kids that can't like, all this stuff. And I was like, okay, but there's a point to
no,
this.
that's abuse.
There is a degree, yeah.
There is
Yeah.
like building character. and abuse. That was abuse.
Yeah, I
That's
was like, you can't
child
go
neglect.
that much into it. I was like, and also, I mean, I think some of it went into weird ideas of, end times, and like, people who get worried about, like, a nuke is gonna come and there's gonna be some crisis. And I don't know how much of that also went into it, but
Oh yeah.
Wow.
I also was like, this was what was going on. And then I think back through, I'm like, okay, so why weren't people saying and doing things? And I've asked a couple people that I still kept in contact, and one person did tell me, they were like, one person said, "Oh, we thought it was crazy and we tried to say something." And that made me feel a little bit better, to make me realize
Yeah.
that it wasn't everybody else just thinking this was normal. Cause I was like, what was going on?
Right. And I'm like, where was everybody? Where were the friends and family like coming in and be like, this is not right?
And
Yeah.
were they doing that just like with mainly like the adopted kids, or was it like, because I know they had boys as well? Maybe
So
they
my
were like trying to roughen you guys up like the boys, because that's
I'm not sure because of the age gap. My brothers were already out of the house, so they didn't
Okay.
live. My brothers were spent ages 5 and 6 through 17 and 18 in Africa, so
Hmm.
they didn't experience it in the U.S. So they
Okay.
never, like, they
Uh,
experienced like their permit. The most of their childhood was spent in Africa, and so you didn't have to worry about heat because it was
yeah.
always warm. You know what I mean? There were certain things that were always done. So you didn't have to worry about. But it's and also, like, my thought was like, well, then probably should have picked a better area to live in that wasn't, so cold. But
Yeah.
really
You know,
cold.
yeah.
That's
but
I
I
wouldn't
will
crazy.
say
say it's a common it's common. It's a common sense thing. And
it's
this is
always
why like how and I have talked about this in the past. When people want to adopt, there has to be further research on the parents who want to adopt. There has to be some type of like psychological tests done. Like, can you handle this? Because I feel like if your parents would have went through that, and I understand your situation was a little more different because they were missionaries and they were there. They're like, well, we might as well just adopt and take
yeah.
these two girls with us. And I feel like if they would have gone through that test, they wouldn't have been able to adapt because that type of thinking of a little bit of the end of the world, a little bit of we're just going to rough it through life and figure that no.
That's not how you
Well, and
raise a child that's already gone through so much trauma. Like,
yeah. Well, and
like
I
what's
think exactly, because somebody said that, and I had never thought about this. A friend of mine's mom said that. She said, I was like, she's like, you can't even do that to your own children, but you can't adopt children and then put them through that. And
Exactly.
I hadn't thought about that, but I think you guys have kind of alluded to this before in some of your videos, but if you are going to adopt, you have to make some sacrifices yourself.
Yeah.
And I think that was one of the problems, is I don't think, like, my dad was willing to change his lifestyle.
Mm.
doesn't
His
sound like
thinking.
it does
Yeah,
not
his
sound
thinking and I'm sorry, a lot of adoptive parents, a lot of them fall into that category because
Yeah.
that whole, them staying in the white area and not
Yep.
wanting to change their lifestyle because again, they expect you to come and fit into their life, but they never expect to fit. How do you fit? How do you fit into their life? And how do you fit into the new world that they've put you in?
And
and
that's the thing. Oh yeah.
go ahead. I was gonna say, even like, I think it's really, really apparent with like white people that adopt out of the race, because obviously there's more sacrifices that have to be made. That's
Yeah.
just the truth. But even people that adopt within the same race, like they're not even aware of how much sacrificing has to be done. I have some family members and friends who adopted like within their same race, and they're just like keeping status quo, like nothing really changed. And I'm like, do you know this child has gone through so much, like being through the
Yeah.
foster care system, like,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
you don't want to like really do some research on how you can position this child's life in a better way. Like, and they're like, oh no, well, we're just gonna treat them like our other children. Like, that's all they
That's
need.
the
It's like,
worst.
and I'm like, just because y'all are the same color, like they've gone through such different experiences, like you guys cannot put them in the same box. But with white people, adopting outside of the race, it's even more like if you're adopting outside of the race, even more sacrifices.
That is
And
the
you would
most
think,
dangerous. That
I
is
was gonna
honestly
say,
the most dangerous thing when it comes to
mhm,
adoption. That whole, oh, we're just gonna treat them like our kids. We're gonna
yeah.
treat them the same way as our kids. It's like that is so dangerous. Go ahead. Go ahead.
That's what I was gonna say, because my next thing I was gonna say is like when you just are treating them exactly the same, and this goes to whether it's transracial or not.
Hmm.
There are things that we go through that are different. So, for
Yeah.
example, if you are adopting a child from another country, they are not gonna have a medical history, which means
Hmm.
you as the parent have to train them how to advocate and how to do these things for themselves. I
Yeah.
got zero training. Actually, I got negative zero.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I've now had to learn the hard way of
Hmm.
how to advocate for myself in my
Yeah.
Yeah.
30s. Something that a parent should have done. They should have, you know what I mean? Like parents, I talk to other friends and they're like, you mean you should
Yeah.
have physical once a year? You should have all these things. I was
Oh,
like, no,
wow. You
no,
have
that
that?
never happened. I was like, no. Once the government was like, you're vaccinated, you're all good to go as far as like getting the documents, that was it. That was the last time I saw a doctor.
So dangerous and neglectful.
No way.
Yeah.
Ah,
At
I
least with
just
my.
I'm thinking about it like when you're coming in from Africa, where there's so many different, like there's
Yeah.
different diseases in Africa than there are in America. Wouldn't you want to like regulate like how the child's body is changing and shifting because of the environment? Like I
No.
Yeah.
remember I was going to the doctors back to back and I was getting hella shots in America, even
Same.
after I came, so
I
that's
I remember being in and out of the hospital for at least the first 6 months of being here. Like
yeah.
I had all these issues wrong with me. Like I had worms, I had malaria, and my
Mhm.
parents were making sure, okay, she needs to, they made sure that they list from A through Z just to make sure that I was okay. That is honestly so saddening and so heartbreaking, Julie, that you did not get that experience. Like you were supposed to have a better experience, and parents who were supposed to do things like take you to the hospital and figure out, okay, what's your history when it comes to health wise, or even if they didn't know, still try and
Get
took
the
you like,
test, because somebody was
yeah,
like, oh,
test.
if they're like, oh, you can easily do X, Y, and Z tests. They'll give you like the baseline as to like which types of things you struggle with. I said, oh, really? Well, that's news to me. And they're
Mhm.
like,
Yeah.
and I was like, oh, okay. And so figuring these things out, and I mean, like, I came to find out, oh, okay, I'm struggling with X. Okay, guess what? With thyroidism, it is hereditary, but it's, you know what I mean? But it's also one of those things
Yeah.
super common for Black women. And
Yeah.
so I think that was the other thing too, is like when you have especially with transracial, we have a different experience when we go to the hospital.
Hmm.
Period.
Hmm.
Like all the research is out there. Like people don't think Black women experience pain the same way. There's all kinds of
Hmm.
research that's been done that people like already
Hmm.
don't take our word for it. So then you're going to raise a child just like you would, but not realizing
Hmm.
that my experience is never going to be what your experience is. I mean, obviously, you have this with the police too. Your experience with
Yeah.
the police isn't going to be different. I remember thinking, it's funny, now I say it out loud. I'm like, why did I think that? But you don't know what you don't know. I remember
Hmm.
being young and being like, oh, like hearing people say, like, oh, if I get pulled over by a cop like the first time for a speeding ticket, I'll just cry and like you get out of it. Like those are what
Yeah.
all the white women who were
Yeah.
blonde. And
Yeah.
then I get pulled over the first time and the guy is awful.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, wait a second.
It
It's not the
doesn't.
same
It's
experience.
not the same.
It's
Yeah.
not the same experience. So those are those things that people have to stop and think about. Like I think you guys just had your recent video about having like mentors and having people to have
Yeah.
those uncomfortable conversations with.
Yeah.
It's so important because it's not enough to just love a child,
Yeah.
Hmm.
and it's not enough to just, I'm going to treat them the same as my own biological child. Well,
Yeah.
they may not have the same experience because biology wise, they may not have the same things. Like you guys talk about, like, oh yeah, so somebody who's had all these sicknesses or stuff like that from a young age, that's affecting their body,
Yeah.
and then to just be like, oh, we're not going to raise them at all about how to take care of themselves health wise, how to advocate for themselves. We're not going to give them like a good healthy baseline approach for any of that. We're just going to treat them like we would ours. But I'm like, but the thing is, we're not, because you guys
No.
still have your medical history. I
Yeah.
remember hearing about my parents' medical history and being like, oh yeah, so and so struggles with diabetes, so we got to watch that. And I'd be like,
Mm.
but what
What
about
about
me?
me? Yeah.
you know Why does
Yeah,
it
that's
do?
it
You
does
gotta
it.
give thumbs up when you're saying
StreamYard.
something smart.
StreamYard does that. I've seen it happen with other creators too, like watching their YouTube videos. StreamYard just
It just
pops
pops
it
up.
up.
Okay.
Julie, what I was going to say about your comment, like, thank you so much for breaking that down, because when we think about like um, being able to see the differences and experiences of adopted children, a lot of times medical is not even a part of the conversation. And I'm just so grateful that you're bringing that up, because
Yeah.
it's simple things like your child coming in and maybe they are because of some of the traumas they've endured, they don't process things the same way.
Mhm.
And for example, like me, when I first came to America, like I was super, super messy as a child, like very messy. Like you probably couldn't like walk a straight path in my bedroom because I had stuff like just thrown all over. And part of that is being a child, but part of it is also like I had so much going on up here. The
Mhm.
things
Mhm.
in like the real world weren't even like a huge consideration to me. Like me being clean, taking care of my body, me like wanting to do good for myself, like that just was not even a part of the conversation because there was so much mentally happening in my head, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
And um going back to the health aspect, it's like mental health is a huge component when your child
Mhm.
is going through so much and trying to rationalize everything, their reality.
Yeah.
um they're not going to be at the same level that your other children are going to be at, right? As far as
Mhm.
like responsibilities, being able to do
Mhm.
things and having those same expectations, you shouldn't to a certain degree. Now, I had one therapist who said something that like when I was younger, I felt like was kind of disrespectful. But when I got older, I was like, okay, it makes some sense. And she told my parents, and she was like, because of Howard's experiences, her trauma, the abuse
Mhm.
she went through, she's almost like 10 years behind other kids
Mhm.
as far as emotional and mental capacity, right? And so you have to be very patient with her, right? So where your 15-year-old children might be, your 18-year-old children might be, she might not get up to that point until she's like 20 or something like that, because
Mhm.
she's had to work so much on how to fix her
Survive.
trauma, fix
Mhm.
all of the emotional like wounds that are inside of her, that
Mhm.
her like doing the laundry is the last thing that she really is going to think about. Her keeping her
Right.
house, her room clean is going to be the last thing that she thinks about. You know what I mean? And it just sounds like a small thing, but it really is, I think, a reality that a lot of people don't really think about. You know what I mean? It's like having those expectations. I think it needs to be a little bit different for people who are adopted versus biological children, because again, they were nurtured, they had more loving home, or that they at least were used to a certain type of lifestyle now than the adopted
Mhm.
child is.
It's huge. It's not just a little thing. That's huge because that is just it's going to help like understand your child because I think a lot of adoptive parents when they adopt they don't think about that aspect and then when they get the child they had this image of what they're expecting oh this child's going to be fitting in their behavior is going to be the same as every other kid but then when they don't get that they're like they freak out and then sometimes they disrupt and get rid of the
Mhm.
child instead of taking a step back like wait a minute this child as gone through trauma like her brain he or she their brain does not function the same way they're going to have different behaviors and ways of just looking at life differently and it's so sad that we actually have to talk about that which is like it's like something that you should know that but because a lot of people when it comes to adoption it's about the saviorism aspect of it they don't think about the child. It's all about them.
Mhm.
Julie and I, how about you, Miss? Like Julie and I talked about in the beginning was all about, her parents telling her, we sacrificed for you, we sacrificed, we did this for you. But they never really took the chance to look at Julie. Julie, like, what about Julie?
What did you sacrifice? Y'all are doing the same things. y'all y'all
That was
already
me.
That's a good
you
one.
guys,
That's a
you
good
guys
one.
already went to Africa like before you even adoption
Yeah.
wasn't part of your plan. You wanted to go to Africa. That was part of your mission in life. Like you guys didn't
Exactly.
really. I mean, I get it. You brought people into strangers into your home. Yes, that is a sacrifice. I get it as far as like comfort and all that, but it doesn't really seem like they really went out of their way to.
No.
Yeah.
I know,
Like,
because they would try to bring up like the money thing. Oh, like we had to spend this, and I'm like,
What?
but
but
there was no
also
light sometimes on hot water. Like what?
exactly.
Yeah.
And to your guys' point about, especially when for you guys being adopted at such a like pivotal age, 8 and 9, you've gone through so much trauma. I can't even imagine somebody being like, "Hey, we're gonna adopt these people." And I know people do this. I straight up know that they do this. We're gonna adopt these people, and we're gonna change their life, and it's all gonna be great.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, well, think about that. Like the world is completely upended. I mean, I remember coming to the US the first time. And even though I was still raised in a white person, like white home, I was still raised still very like different, didn't have like, still like electricity because none of the village really did at that point. So I remember coming to the US even at like 3, and I can't imagine coming and doing that and then also being with brand new people. Cause I was like, this cheese is nasty. Like I remember all of those things and doing that with a brand new family. At least I knew mine,
Yeah,
Yeah.
you know.
yeah, you
So
did.
Yeah.
that is a lot. But I think something I was thinking about this as you were talking. I think part of the problem too with people not thinking about the adoptees is whether you are adopted as a baby like me or older like you guys, we go through all this complex
Um,
identity and all these things as a child.
mhm.
Okay?
Mhm.
Like we go through very how would I say it? Deep levels of thoughts
Mhm.
because we have to, because we are black and they are white. And
Yeah.
therefore we're dealing with this adoption thing. But we're dealing with it as a child. Like we don't even have the brain capacity to process that.
Yeah.
Julie,
And
I'm
yet we're
just
having to
oh
do it.
sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was
I
just
was
saying like
gonna
we're having
say
to do it.
Mhm.
based like with I'm so glad that you brought that up with like identity because I remember when I was younger, I did not have a sense of identity at all, like who I was.
Mhm.
And I remember every single year almost, I would try to imitate other people because I had not find myself. If
Mhm.
Mhm.
I liked someone else how they talked, I would try to practice and talk like them. If
Mhm.
I liked how somebody else dressed, I would try to imitate. So I was always trying to be a shell of other people, um, hoping that would give me some type of value and a sense of like self and worth. And
Mhm.
it just never ever came. And I think me and Fatma were talking about this in our last couple of videos where sometimes whenever we met other black people or African people would cling on to them so much
Yeah.
because it's almost like we felt like if we're around them long enough,
They
their
would know who you
identity
are.
kind of like,
Yeah.
come on
That's
to
so
us
true.
so that we would feel what it felt like to be, in our natural selves. And it
Mhm.
never happened, of course. And we have
Yeah.
to go on our own journey. But having to explore that and navigate that as a child is so confusing. It's like you feel like you've
And it's
never arrived.
misunderstood. And it's misunderstood because as you were saying that, how I had the same struggle. But my struggle with that was, trying to figure out like who, what I liked and trying to explore stuff. And because I was homeschooled, like not a lot of opportunities to really do that. It'd be like, oh, meet somebody, try this. But then my parents reacted so negatively. They were like, Julie just wants to be like everybody else. But we want Julie to be Julie. Like Julie should be Julie. And I was like, but I don't know what that means. And
Eventually.
it
Yeah. I don't
also goes back to, like I said in the past video oh, but you also don't want me to be black. So I'm trying to figure out like how to be like these other people. And all I have around me is a bunch of white people. And I don't know like who am I? Like what am
Confusing.
I? Like I'm trying to figure that out. But yet then when you're getting met with that with negative of, oh, she's just wanting to like glom onto people. She just doesn't have any of her own like own self identity. And I'm like, but I'm trying to figure out what my identity is. And also,
Ooh,
none of the things I was doing were bad things. So I think we could have had a little bit more patience because if it was the nail polish, they, you know what I mean? Like it, clothes, even talk, like none of that is detrimental to the person's like well being.
yeah.
I can totally relate to both of y'all in just feeling like a shell of a human being growing up, where you just like you're just trying to survive almost. Like for me, I always think about, I there was times because I did not know who I was and I was trying to survive in this environment. I would go like inside my head and I would create stories. Like that's how
Same.
that's how I escape.
Same.
Really?
Me
I'm not the only one.
too.
Oh my god. It was the, oh my god. I used to like escape in my mind and
Yes.
create stories where I would just sit. We could be talking and having a conversation, and I would just be gone in my head creating stories to like freaking survive. And I think that really helped me in not creating some type of like mental issue. Of course, I have anxiety, depression, all that stuff, but like something a little more, okay, she's a little not there, because that type of stuff can create some type of like split in somebody's head, because you're living in an area where nobody looks like you. You're trying to figure out who you are, and you're trying to heal, and you're trying to like grieve all the things that you lost, like your mom and dad. Like, what are they doing? What is the culture like? How do they make their food? Like all that different stuff. It's like, should I do that? Like, and you don't even know where to start, because nobody, who's gonna teach you that? Your white parents? No.
And you're trying to figure out things like, you're trying to manage your hair, which is completely different from the people.
Mm.
You're trying to manage, oh, okay, so I get ashy. I can't just do what you guys do, just walk out of like get out of a shower and put on clothes and that's the end
Mm-mm.
of it. Like,
No.
so there's all these things that you're trying to understand and how to do. And even
Mm-hmm.
thinking through like there would be things, it'll come up every once in a while. I don't remember what it was. And then came to find out, oh yeah, when you were little, you struggled with X. And I was like, you mean and that wasn't like a clue. Maybe we should go and get that checked out. Oh, I mean, you're fine. And I was like, no, that actually wasn't fine.
Yeah.
But no, when you're talking about the imagination, because when at one point when I was younger, I had such a vivid imagination and I was trying to find ways to connect with people. And I think
Uh,
because of such the poverty level that I was still going through and like how people just weren't seeing it, I was trying to find ways, how do I have a conversation with somebody when like
mm-hmm.
we don't use the same stuff, we're not doing the same stuff. And I would create these stories in my head, but then the hard part was at some point like they would start to come out and I would start to say things. And then, like I said, my parents would then react, and everything was
Yeah.
about me. And even recently, at one point, my mom made a comment. She was like, yeah, I mean, you really struggled with X, Y, and Z, like when you were like 8 years old, and blah, blah, blah. And I said, that's a result of trauma.
Mm. That, oh my gosh, that is so true.
And
And
she
that,
was like, I'm not saying like you were bad or anything. Like that was just but it was still it was a struggle that you had. I said, no, it's a result of trauma.
yeah.
And they're like, oh, because I was like, yeah, like you said, with the adoption, even without being like me being recognized that I was like separated because I was so young, but there were times I would still see my birth mother up until I was about 11. So even during those periods of times when I would be told how to feel about her by my
Yeah.
by my dad. Like, oh, she's coming, give her a brief
Mhm.
hug, not too long, call her this, do this. And I'm like, okay, like this is what okay, like nothing about like, hey, how are you feeling about this? Like, what can we do to support you? None of that. Like those were
That is
never
so,
questions.
that is so sad. And it got me back to thinking, because now, being an adult and taking in charge of my own health and my mental, physical, all that stuff. And like you, Julie, like those things that were happening, and your mom's like, well, that was just something you experienced. Like, no, there's something else going on. And I realized I struggle with anxiety and depression really bad. And it's like, I think I've always had anxiety and depression my whole life. And it's like my parents didn't really do too much about it when I was growing up. They just saw it as just me just misbehaving.
Hmm.
And it's like, I wish like they would have just stepped back. They could see that my sister had anxiety and she was put on
Mm.
medication. But for me, my anxiety and depression, they saw it as just me being misbehaving, which is it's so like sad that again it goes back to when it comes to adoption and Black children and how you are seen differently in the world and how you are demonized more. And because of that, you're going to struggle with certain mental stuff that you can suffer from, and they could watch you suffer from, but because they don't see you as a human in that kind of level, they're not going to help you,
And it
which is
looks
so sad.
different. And
It
it looks
looks
different. It
different.
looks different on us. Like when my
Yeah.
friend made that point of, she's like, it looks different on us. Like
Hmm.
literally physically it looks different on us. And when
Yeah.
she said that, I was like, oh, because I would be like, why are people not listening?
Yeah.
Like for example, I was, told like, oh, I suffered from like bad dreams, night dreams, whatever. All realized was like, no, I suffered from like night terrors as a result of anxiety.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
was like,
And
oh, that makes more sense. Like I had this anxiety, this anxious, like I'd go to bed and I'd be like, I don't know. But it would be like,
yeah.
oh, we'll figure this out. We'll do different stuff. But I was like, no, it's anxiety. Like what's causing the anxiety? But it looks different on us because I
Hmm.
think the sad part is that our faces don't carry it the same either,
Hmm.
and we can
Hmm.
still like perform. And I
Yeah.
do think this is one of the reasons why we were enslaved for as many years as we were, was because how strong on the outside we can carry stuff.
Hmm.
And people just like want to just be like, oh, but see,
They
you
seem
don't
like they're
look like,
fine. Yeah.
and you don't look like, I don't know what your white sister's name was, Famata, but you don't
Kayla.
look like her. So
Yeah.
because you don't look like her, then you can't have the same thing she has.
Yeah.
I think part of it also is like because the biological child has been nurtured by these parents, like they've been able to express and show all different parts and emotions,
Yeah.
and the biological parents can recognize all those different emotions because they experienced that from when they were little babies,
Hmm.
growing up forward. And so it's almost like it's like a forgiven, like, okay, like I see that you are sad about this because you're crying, but that child feels like it's okay to cry because they trust that part,
Hmm.
the family, they trust the parents, that
Hmm.
bond is there where they can show those emotions and feel
Yeah.
like the parent is going to be the parent and come and save them from
Yeah.
those feelings. And but when you're adopted, when you are feeling like I'm not a part of this family, I have to show face,
Yeah.
I have to be strong, I have to be good, or else my parents might send me back. Like I can't show all different emotions. That's something I definitely struggled with when I was younger, especially. Is like I can't show all different emotions because I want to save face and make it seem like everything is good and I'm still a
Mhm.
good child. And I think a lot of adoptive parent kids struggle with that. And the biological kids, they can have an attitude and they still feel safe and secure. They can cuss out their parents and still feel like, you
Yeah.
know, nothing is going to happen to them. They can be sad and depressed, and the family is going to cater to them because that's their blood. They want their blood to do good and carry on and be in high spirit. And not saying that's the case for every single adoptive family, of course not. But I think a lot of us adoptive kids, because we have a lot of guilt sometimes, we carry
Hmm.
that burden on our shoulder a lot, that we can't show all parts of who we are to our parents.
And it's made worse if you're reminded either by
Yeah.
society or the adoptive parents of like, you
Yeah.
should feel so grateful, you should feel
Mhm.
this, you're in such a privileged situation because I mean, you have siblings that didn't get that, you know what I mean? So then you
Yeah,
spiral into
it's
that.
exactly. And that's why, like, how what you said was so spot on, and definitely that does add to it. And but then there's times when you do show those emotions where you're vulnerable, like Julie just said, you get shut down. You get
Hmm.
told you're just misbehaving. You get told, oh well, you just need to like get along. You need to just figure it out. Like stop. And it's like, dang, like my sister, my brother, my white brother and sister just did the same thing yesterday, and they got a different reaction. But when I do it, it's a different ball game. Yeah.
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 Mm,
Yeah.
dang.
But we are basically at an hour. Julie, is there anything else that you want to add to this conversation?
Um, just, like I said, I think people really need to think about adoption from the perspective of the adoptee, and just going into it and thinking, I'm just going to love them, it's enough, I'm just going to treat them exactly the same, it's just enough. And it's not just simplistic like that, and it
No.
really is, thinking through. So if, what would it be like for them, or maybe even having conversations, maybe not even taking like a super triggering thing, but having conversations even with your adopted children, like, okay, so if you're living in, what is it like? Like, how does that make you feel when people,
Hmm.
creating that space so that you can have those safe dialogues, that can also help too. But just thinking that if I just treat them either exactly the same, or like, I know for you, Famata, you were not treated the same at all. And so you got to see this disparity. I just don't think, it's helping. And I know people want to do the work and talk about, the adoptive parents and all the stuff that they need to do and the support they need. I
Yeah.
get that, but they're the adults in the room,
Yeah.
and it's the children that really need the support and the help.
Yeah.
And I think adopted parents really need to understand that they need help from other people, because I think that is one of the things that I feel like was so bad with me, was that my parents wanted no help from anybody else. So that's why they were homeschooling, that's why they were doing all these things and not
Hmm.
taking any help from anybody else. But the thing is you need help from other people, whether you guys were talking about mentors, whether you need people who are of a different, of that child's ethnicity, because they can speak to what their experience is going to be like.
Mm,
Yeah.
Yes, not every Black person has the same experience, but there's a whole lot of experiences that we share.
mm,
Yeah.
yeah.
And those aren't conversations that we can just have with a white person. Like, my mom is never going to know what it's like for me
Mm.
to like go shopping and have to, like, either have people follow me around to make sure I'm not shoplifting, or, you know what I mean? She's never going to have those experiences.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a big part of, like, if you are going to adopt, you need a supportive system that is going to help you with that. And if you think you can do it on your own, don't adopt.
Oh my
Maybe
gosh.
just send some money
Exactly.
to somebody else.
Yeah. And it's
Like if you think you can have your own child, like, and just do it on
I
your
know.
own, then don't have a child, because there's so
Yeah.
many. It's a tribe. Like you need a tribe to take care of children. Like that is just
Yes.
point blank. Period. Like in all aspects. Like having
yeah.
someone babysit, having someone mentor. Because you can't be everything for your child.
you
It's
you really
impossible.
can't. And, like, continue to learn, because the adoptive parents that I've seen that seem to have the better relationships with their children are parents that continue to learn and educate themselves, and they're like, oh, okay, so
And
we
are
we
open.
noted. Yes, they're open. They're like, oh, okay, so we're gonna change some of these things. We're realizing that, like, we're saying some of these things that maybe, isn't helpful, because as adoptees, we have to unlearn things that we were raised with. Like, I find myself being like, oh my gosh, why did I think X was okay?
Yeah.
Like, to be like X. And then I was like, oh, well, that's because that was all I was taught. So I didn't know anything else.
Yeah.
Um, and I
And
think
I
you
think
guys have mentioned that too.
Yeah, and I think part of the reason why there's so many issues with adoptees and their adopted parents when it comes to this transracial aspect of it is because there's more help um given to the adoptive parent versus the child, and that's why there's so many like back and forth and clashing and abuse and so much that comes out of it because the, like you said, the adopted child gets forgotten. And when it comes to the process of someone wanting to adopt, they need to be put through more like a rigorous thing. And it's like you can't just pick up and adopt. There's a lot that goes into the research. You have to think about the child more, and you have to do like thorough research. We've talked about, we're gonna keep saying the same stuff
Over and over.
over and over. You need, like how I said, you need a community. You need someone who looks like the child to come and say, hey, this is not really good for your child, because at the end of the day, you're a different race, and you're gonna miss things that you're just going to miss because you're a different race, not because you necessarily like want to hurt the child. No, you're just going
Yeah,
to miss
because you
things.
just don't experience
Yeah,
things the same. And I think it's
yeah.
why, as I've gotten older, I've gravitated towards like people who look different than my friends used to. Like my friends before, I mean, I would be like the only black person and everybody else was white. And now it's like
Yeah.
I might have a white friend, maybe
Mhm.
one or two. I
Yeah.
definitely have other things too. Like one of my really good friends is Vietnamese, like all that kind of stuff. But like there's like a comfort level of when it's at least the, oh, you're an other as well. So like
Mhm.
you get the, like we make these funny jokes. Like I was playing pickleball the other night and we're like, okay, so like you won't miss us on the court. We're the only black girls out here. You know what I mean? Like you can say that when there's four of you black girls together. Like and and I was like, there's like a comfort level of like less things that I have to explain because there's certain parts of things that just, go into your life. Like I said, you just don't think about it, but other people don't think about it, but I'm like, no, it's part of us.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
so yeah.
that is so well said. And thank you again so much, Julie, for coming on. And
Yeah.
like I said in the beginning, like it was such a pleasure having you the first time and also having you again for part.
Yes,
And how I was telling everyone, I'm like, Julie helped put us on the map with that video.
you did, girl. You really, really did.
I don't know what
You,
happened. I'll be like, wait, it said how
It's our most watched video out of all.
it's. I think it's like almost 60,000 at this
Yeah,
point. Yeah,
yeah,
many, which is
it's
crazy.
insane.
I'm
yeah.
like,
Because
okay.
you got a good story. You got a good story. But thank you so much for coming on again. If you are,
Yeah.
yeah, if you are an adoptee and like Julie, you want to come on and share your stories, let us know. Either make a comment or email us at adoptedgals.com. We would love to have you on our channel to hear your story, not only to help you heal, but to also help other adoptees. And don't forget to share, tell people about our channel, like, comment, and just let us know we exist and to be part of this. And thank you so much for coming and watching us again. Till next time.
Hey, guys.
And press